300-pound dudes tackling you on a frozen field, the last thing you want to do is stay out there. Believe me, the Rams players were thinking about the jacuzzi at their team hotel, that they find it laughable, but more laughable if they totally disregard the trade whatsoever. This guy has transformed the balance of power in the Eastern Conference. And you could argue the entire defense is going to be absolutely ferocious next year. But if your number one priority is to win a Super Bowl, then J.J. Watt is making a grave mistake. To ride this Chad Henne experiment for an entire game, I might need a whole bottle of Hennessy just to get through that. Guy who's won 8 division titles, who's made 5 AFC championship appearances, who's reached the Super Bowl 3 times and has won 2 Super Bowls for this organization. Aaron Rodgers has only won 1 Super Bowl with Green Bay. Drew Brees has only won 1 Super Bowl with New Orleans. There's only 13 quarterbacks in NFL history that have won multiple Super Bowls, and Big Ben is one of those individuals. Good morning and welcome to Morning Joe right here on J&J Media Network, Facebook Live, Twitter, and on YouTube. I'm Jonah Malkin with you every single Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Glad you could join me on a Wednesday morning. I have to talk about the French Open and then more of the French Open and then even more of the French Open. Yes, I know the NBA Finals are beginning on Thursday. I'll touch on that more next week. Some interesting football news we'll continue to get and break down as the summer continues to roll around. But I have to start with the French Open and end with the French Open because it's been an unbelievable tournament so far, highlighted by yesterday's marquee matchup, the quarterfinal matchup we'd all been waiting for, we'd all been craving and salivating. 2 icons, 2 goats of the sport, Rafael Nadal and Novak Djokovic, met in the quarterfinal yesterday, and the King of Clay backed up and corroborated his moniker. Rafael Nadal defeated Novak Djokovic in the quarterfinals yesterday, 6-2, 4-6, 6-2, and 7-6, 7-4 in the tiebreak, arguably beating his most bitter rival, not to mention the reigning and defending French Open champion, in a match that lasted about 4 hours and 12 minutes, which is to be expected between these two gentlemen. Typically, when there's some combination of Nadal, Federer, Djokovic, and Nadal, these matches tend to go at least 4 sets. And if they are over 4 sets, or even if they're 3 sets, they last an extremely long amount of time. They extend, and the duration just continues to build on itself, and it doesn't disappoint. It never disappoints. It didn't disappoint yesterday. It was absolutely sensational tennis. I think both of these guys obviously are special. That's an understatement. But the quality of tennis that we saw yesterday was just spectacular. Every single point, every game was tremendous. The average rally, I think in the first set, was about 12 to 14 shots. The first set and a half took over 2 hours to complete. And again, this is what you would expect when you watch both of these two guys. The only disappointment that I had, and I'd mentioned this on Monday, was the fact that we were getting this matchup in the quarterfinals as opposed to the semifinals or even the finals, because it had the aura of a finals matchup in a Grand Slam. And obviously, this is a surface that Rafael Nadal has bested pretty much every single opponent he's faced. Djokovic has gotten the better of him a couple of times, including last year. But when you really watch this match, and fortunately I got a chance to sit down and watch the entire thing, Rafael Nadal really dominated the majority of this match. If you are watching this through an objective lens, with the exception of a few stretches that I'll highlight, for the first 2.5 sets, Nadal absolutely was dominating Djokovic. Obviously, we see it in the score, 6-2 in the first set, 6-2 in the third set. But if you weren't watching the match and you just saw the score, you're saying to yourself, well, Djokovic must have battled back in the second set, and to a degree he did, but Nadal led 3-0 in the second set, and he was serving for the game. He was on serve. And Djokovic, to his credit, found a little extra gas in the propane tank and managed to begin a little bit of a surgence here. Breaks Nadal, trailing 3-0. Then rattles off 5 of the next 6 games to pull out a 6-4 unlikely second set. And that was just one of several instances in which Djokovic was showing that type of resolve, was showing that type of championship medal. And to his credit, as much as he wanted to compliment Rafael Nadal for showing why he is the great champion that he is, and obviously I'm going to praise Rafael Nadal immensely. But Novak Djokovic showed you just why he's a great champion as well. And this is what makes these two legends absolutely spectacular. It's not just the incredible competitive will and determination to win, but it's the fact that they also have the talent to match and to back it up and to actually allow them to overcome these adverse situations, because there are a lot of tennis players on the tour that exhibit tremendous will, that are passionate, that are infatuated with the game of tennis, and they have a burning desire to win, but most of the time they simply lack the talent to overcome those large deficits. The actual talent level of these two gentlemen is unmatched. It's unparalleled. And again, with Djokovic, as much as he was praising Rafael Nadal for that championship medal, he exhibited it on numerous occasions. Obviously, I highlighted how in the second set, he battled back down 3-0, facing a break point, returning, and he still managed to break Rafael Nadal, and then again, rattle off 5 of the next 6 games. But it's more than that. He's trailing 2-1, fourth set. Jumps out to a 4-1 lead, a 5-2 lead. Nadal battles all the way back, to his credit, and sends it into a tiebreak. Djokovic is down 6-1 in the tiebreak, at least battles back to make it 6-4, a respectable tiebreak score. So these are just a couple of examples in which Djokovic, to his credit, never caved, never acquiesced a single time. But that's what makes this matchup so intriguing, is the fact that when you're facing two of the legends in the sport, there is no room for error. There's no margin for error. And Nadal showed just why clay has been a sanctuary, has been a safe haven for tennis for him, because he musters up little doses of energy when it seems unlikely, and he manages to channel that into victory. Just had another spirited effort yesterday. Again, he should have won the second set, blew that one. Then in the fourth set, when he was really facing some adversity and the threat of potentially this match going to a fifth set, which would have been the second consecutive match that he has went the distance, he didn't buckle. Again, trailing 4-1, 5-2. Wins his serve 5-3, breaks Djokovic to make it 5-4, ties it up at 5 apiece, and then really just went on a tear in the tiebreak, scorched out to a 6-1 start, and never looked back. But to me, this felt personal for Nadal. This had the writings of exacting some revenge written all over it. And it's not to say that Nadal was harboring any bad will or any animosity towards Djokovic, but the reality is last season he was battling chronic foot pain throughout the entire French Open, and ultimately after He exacerbated it against Djokovic in the semifinals of the French Open last year. That's what forced him to be sidelined for about half a year. And obviously, Djokovic, to his credit, took advantage of it. But Nadal's probably thinking in the back of his mind, hey, if my foot isn't hurt, I likely win that match. Remember, he won the first set in that match, then dropped 3 consecutive sets. So Djokovic, I've always contended, is the most versatile tennis player that I've ever seen. And there's a strong argument to be made that he's the most athletic tennis player that I've ever seen. And yet, with all of that, Nadal is a sensational athlete, and what he does on clay, on the surface of clay, the movement, he made Novak Djokovic somehow look ordinary and slow on clay. That's how fast Nadal moved on clay. His movement is a form of art. It's absolutely beautiful to watch. There's a beautiful rhythm and flow and elegance to it. His ability to hit all of these inside out forehands. Every time there was a ball about 50-50 down the middle, or even 2/3 of the way to his backhand, he was backpedaling all the way, running around that backhand, hit that inside out forehand, delivering knockout blows. And he's been doing that throughout his entire career. But this is the one surface where you really see it on the forefront. It's just his movement on clay is unrivaled. It really, really is. And now overall, you look at this matchup between these two legends, and Nadal's closed the gap to 1. Djokovic leads the all-time series 30-29. At Roland Garros, though, Nadal leads at 8-2. Leads at 8-2. And as much as we as tennis fans have been led to believe that the greatest rivalry in the sport of tennis is Federer and Nadal, the truth of the matter is this is the greatest rivalry in the sport, Nadal and Djokovic, because these two guys have met more than any other two opponents in tennis history. This was their 59th meeting. Not to mention these two are legitimate contemporaries. Federer has always been about 5 to 6 years older than Nadal and Djokovic, but Nadal's 35, Djokovic is 35. Now Nadal's going to be turning 36 on Friday. But the point is, they're legitimate contemporaries. These two guys literally have risen at the same exact time. Nadal obviously saw a little bit more early success than Djokovic. It took Djokovic a couple of years on the tour to get his bearings and to find that consistency, which is the impressive thing about both of these two guys. And now Nadal is 110-3 at Roland Garros all time. They've already erected a statue of him outside of Court Philip. I believe that's the center court, or Philippe Quartet, however you pronounce it in French, with the French accent. Apologies if you were expecting a great French accent in this moment. Couldn't deliver that one for you. But the fact of the matter is they've erected a statue for Nadal, and he's still playing. He's an active tennis player. Normally you erect statues for guys that have passed away or have retired. And he's still playing, and he is on the verge of reaching another Grand Slam title at Roland Garros. He's on the verge of capturing his 14th French Open title. And I was highly anticipating this matchup, and it lived up to the billing, as it always does. These two gentlemen never disappoint in that regard. They represent the sport with the utmost class, at least when they face one another. And again, as I mentioned, the great disappointment was the fact that this was just a quarterfinal matchup as opposed to a semifinal or an actual final matchup. Not to mention what was impressive, that's going to just fly under the radar of most tennis fans, was the temperature was 60 degrees Fahrenheit in France. Now, why is that important? Well, that's important because the colder it is, the less the ball is going to be able to travel and the less pop it's going to get when it bounces. So these two gentlemen are whacking all these balls, but it's not getting the same kind of bounce as it normally would if the temperature is a little bit hotter, where the ball can travel a little bit more through the air. Doesn't bounce nearly as high in colder temperatures. So it was an incredible match to watch. And I've said this before, and this is not a political statement. This is the truth of the matter. This is the reality. Nadal benefited so greatly from the fact that Djokovic wasn't allowed to play in the Australian Open. That's how Nadal captured his 21st Grand Slam. And I know that Djokovic says he doesn't regret not getting vaccinated to have played and participated in that tournament, and perhaps he stands by it. But man, if you're Djokovic, you're sitting right now either in your hotel with your wife, with your family, and he's got to be thinking to himself, man, if I just put my pride and my ego aside and I just got vaccinated, I likely would have had 21 Grand Slams. I believe that Djokovic was at the peak of his powers. Nadal was returning to his first major tournament after a 6-month hiatus. Who knows? He was a little bit shaky during stretches of the Australian Open this past January. If Djokovic gets vaccinated and is able to play, he likely has 21 Grand Slams. And now it changes completely the narrative heading into this French Open. But obviously, you can't rewrite history. It is what it is. And now Nadal is really on the verge of stepping on Djokovic and Federer's proverbial necks and stretching his Grand Slam singles titles lead. He's closing on a number 22. He's closing in on number 22. Can't wait to watch the rest of the tournament. And speaking of the rest of the tournament, I want to transition to another quarterfinal in the men's draw. Alexander Zverev, the 3 seed, and Carlos Alcaraz, the number 6 seed in the tournament. This was another highly anticipated quarterfinal matchup between two fairly familiar foes, despite the fact that Alcaraz has only been on the tour for 1 full season. But Alcaraz had been the hottest tennis player on the tour. He has won 4 titles in 4 different tournaments this season. He was about 32-3 of a record coming into this tournament. And he had defeated Zverev in the Madrid Open just about a month ago. And Zverev ultimately defeats him in 4 sets, 6-4, 6-4, 4-6, and 7-6, 9-7 in the tiebreak. This was a little bit of retribution and perhaps poetic justice for Alexander Zverev, because obviously this is a guy who's won the Madrid Open twice. He won it last year, and he won it in 2018, and he reached the final this season again and lost to this opponent, Carlos Alcaraz, in 2 sets. But I think what all of this showed me, and obviously Zverev has shown that he can win on clay. He's already had a lot of success on clay. This is the 2nd consecutive French Open that he's reached the semifinals. So he's proven that he can win on clay, because the surprise is that you have a 6'6" guy who's moving around the way that he is on clay. Because the one thing you know about a 6'6" guy and taller people is normally clay is not their most successful surface to play on, because the nimbleness and the agility that's required to be shifting around from shot to shot, to be off balance the way that you are without the traction on clay, normally doesn't bode well for taller guys. Now, it doesn't mean you have to be 5'8". Obviously, Nadal, Djokovic, these guys at 6 feet, 6'1", 6'2", more than capable. Alcaraz is a shorter guy. Alcaraz is about 5'9", 5'10". So normally this surface bodes well, not for the tree guys. And I mean that in a complimentary way. to Zverev, because on other surfaces, the taller you are, we're seeing on every single surface how much of an advantage that is. Because the truth of the matter is, yes, they've added kind of this herringbone tread pattern, which is supposed to give guys better traction. But the reality is, for a guy who's 6'6", it's still hard to plant the way that you normally want to plant. But what I give Zverev a lot of credit for is, first of all, he's never been one to make mistakes. He's always embraced defeats. He's been extremely sportsmanlike, always very complimentary of players, and he's a very likable guy. So I'm genuinely happy for him that he was able to knock off this up-and-coming sensational Spaniard who seems to be the next coming of Rafael Nadal, and reach another semifinal, because he hasn't obviously managed to break through, but he plays with such a fluidity and grace for someone who's so tall. Always seems to kind of be floating around on the court, and that's so hard to do, again, when you're at that size. But there's something smooth about his movements, and I've always said this about Alexander Zverev, and he's obviously 25. He's always been a really difficult player to predict how he's going to do in the tournament, in a Grand Slam tournament specifically. Because when I look at the upper echelon of tennis players, and he is certainly a part of that upper echelon of tennis players, to me, it gets broken down into 3 tiers. You have the GOATs, which is Nadal, Djokovic, and Federer. You've got tier 2, which to me only includes one man, and that's Daniil Medvedev, who I think is a hair below the GOATs, but I also think is kind of in a class by himself. He's really been exhibiting a lot more consistency, reaching the semis, reaching the finals of these Grand Slams. And then you have tier 3, which is where I place Zverev and Tsitsipas together, because those two guys are kind of the next thoroughbreds that are in the top 5, that continue to just chip away, and they get closer and closer, but are never quite able to get over the hump. Because Alcaraz, his opponent, he is special. He is coming. He is a young lion on the prowl who is preying for meat, but hasn't officially learned how to hunt yet. He's relying purely on his raw instincts and athleticism, but he doesn't quite possess the intellect that's required at this level to maintain that consistency. And of course, that's what's to be expected. He's a young guy. And Zverev, that was the difference. Zverev obviously has an extremely powerful serve. That's always been a major advantage for him, but he played mistake-free tennis. Wasn't making as many errors. I think Alcaraz had 54 unforced errors. Zverev had maybe 34. So he's playing much more consistently, which has always been his Achilles heel. Zverev is, when he reaches these stages, not only is he playing maybe slightly less consistently, but he hasn't been able to connect for all those winners. And that's going to be his challenge against Nadal and against these greats moving forward, is when he gets to the stage, can he start to deliver winners and also not commit the tennis errors that he's been prone to do against the Nadals and the Djokovic's of the world in past tournaments? Because when you look at Zverev, the key for him, to me, is going to be his first serve percentage. He hit a bunch of them against Alcaraz. He's going to need to do it against Nadal. It sets up the table for him for that point. And obviously he's shown his endurance is there. And against Alcaraz, he was hitting a ton of his first serves. His percentage was extremely high, which is truthfully, I think, the reason he won this game, this match, combined with the fact that he was limiting his errors. And so I think that for Zverev, he's been close a couple times. The closest he's gotten was the 2020 U.S. Open. He was the runner-up. Now, obviously, in that tournament, there was no Nadal, there was no Federer because of injuries and COVID. And Djokovic ultimately played in the tournament, but he was disqualified earlier on after out of frustration, pelting a line judge with a ball in the throat. And obviously he was disqualified for the rest of the tournament. And that's where you had Dominic Thiem win his first and capture his first Grand Slam. Zverev was up 2-0 in that final and blew it. And he hasn't forgotten about that. So he's shown a lot of resolve and toughness and competitive spirit, not only throughout his journey to return back to a semi, but also in this tournament, in this match, in the quarterfinal, because he's up 2-1, but Alcaraz had just rattled off a set, was serving for the set. He was down in the tiebreak 6-5, and he managed to save a set point and then ultimately win the match. But I've just been very impressed with Zverev in this tournament. Again, he's not one of these guys who you would think would move extremely well like he does on clay, but he does. And I think if we get the best version of Zverev, if he is firing all cylinders, especially with his serve, and he's limiting his errors and his unforced errors, then he might be able to give Nadal a match. But we'll have to talk about that after that happens. But congratulations to him. It was another spectacular quarterfinal. And finally, I want to transition to the women's side, talk about some American tennis players. Coco Gauff, the 18-year-old, knocked off fellow American Sloane Stephens in the quarterfinals as well of the French Open yesterday in straight sets, 7-5, 6-2. Obviously, Sloane Stephens is a champion in her own right, won the U.S. Open in 2017. She's 29 now, but she won the U.S. Open in 2017 when she was about 24. She finished as the runner-up at Roland Garros that following May in 2018. And she's always a tricky player, Sloane Stephens. Always seems to be in the mix of these Grand Slams. But Coco Gauff hasn't always been to this stage. In fact, this is the first time that she's ever reached the semifinals of a Grand Slam. She's obviously the 18th seed in the tournament, ranked 18th in the world. Obviously broke onto the tour at age 15. But what's impressive about her to me now that we are beyond the hoopla stage, is that not only is she playing with extreme confidence, so she's playing extremely confidently, but just how I'd complimented Zverev just a minute ago, Goff is playing mistake-free tennis. She's not making errors. And that's been the biggest difference, because inconsistency has been her biggest Achilles heel throughout her first 3 years officially on the tour. Is she's always had the shots. Obviously is continuing to get stronger and stronger. Her conditioning is just going to improve. But it's been the inconsistency aspects of her game that's kind of held her back and derailed her different stretches of tournaments, because she's got the youthfulness, she's got the exuberance, she's got the athleticism. And obviously on clay, that's allowed her to prevail. And it's no shock why the majority of her success she's attained on a clay court. That is factual. The farthest she's advanced in Grand Slams have all come at Roland Garros. And there's no surprise, because clay favors the youth. It favors the more athletic because of the instability of the surface. And she has not dropped a single set yet in this tournament. So she's been dominant. She's been playing mistake-free tennis. She's coming into her own confidence-wise. And I've been enjoying the journey to see her development from the time that she entered, that she really broke onto the tour. Obviously, she joined the juniors at 13, broke into the main WTA kind of rankings at 15, made a name for herself immediately in 2019 at Wimbledon, defeated Venus Williams in the first round, went on to reach the fourth round of that Grand Slam. There's all this hysteria around the tournament because of the success she was attaining so early on. And the precociousness and what was this going to be the next kind of really Venus Williams to break out onto the tour. And she was showing those glimpses of that, but it takes some time. 2020, she continually got a little bit better, reached the fourth round of the Australian Open. Obviously, in 2021, she reached the quarterfinals of Roland Garros. Not to mention the fourth round. She reached the quarterfinals of the French Open, the fourth round of Wimbledon. So she's been trending in the right direction. And this is the development. This is the evolution that's required, is to try to take that next step. You break into the semifinals, you get into a championship game match, and you go from there. But it was an impressive victory for her. She's just looked really solid, serving it extremely well, moving well. Doesn't appear to be battling any injuries, which, knock on wood, you need to be healthy for these Grand Slams. But major congratulations to her. It's been a fantastic, fantastic tournament thus far. All right, finally, my final topic, my Malkins moments. I have a couple great Malkins moments for you. So I have to start with the 2022 French Open, specifically with the aforementioned Coco Gauff, who just defeated Sloane Stephens in the quarterfinals yesterday, 7-5, 6-2. With that victory, as I just mentioned, Coco Gauff has officially reached her first Grand Slam semifinal of her young career. She's just 18 years old, obviously the 18th seed in this tournament, but has finally broken through and punched her ticket to the semifinals. It's a major, major achievement for her. She hasn't dropped a set in this tournament. She's been playing nearly flawless tennis. And obviously she's an American, so we'd love to see that continue. But best of luck moving forward in this tournament for her. But I have to give her a shout out and give her flowers now, because that is an incredible, incredible accomplishment. And similarly, I have to give a shout out to her opponent that she's going to be facing, Martina Trevison, who also reached her first Grand Slam semifinal of her career. Now, she's a little bit farther along in her career than Coco Gauff. Trevison is 28 years old, actually ranked 59th in the world, which is extremely kind of shocking when you see someone out of the top 30 in the world that qualifies for, rather, I shouldn't say qualified, but reaches the semifinals. You really don't see it. You seldom see it. And she obviously defeated the 17 seed Leylah Fernandez, who finished as the runner-up in the 2021 U.S. Open, to Emma Raducanu. Now, Fernandez was a little bit hobbled. She was dealing with some injuries, didn't make any excuses. Credit to her for that. But shout out to Trevison for prevailing, for triumphing over that. This was her 10th straight win for Trevison. I don't really care what stage, what tournament you're in. If you're winning 10 straight matches, that's extremely, extremely impressive. She actually reached the quarterfinals of the French Open nearly 2 years ago. And earlier this season, actually won her first tournament title, came in Rabat, Morocco, the capital of Morocco, in one of those ATP tournaments in Morocco. So she clearly is building a lot of momentum. Clearly, she's had a lot of success on clay. That seems to be her most successful surface. And a major shout out to her. That's an incredible, incredible accomplishment. And finally, my final Malkins moments, totally unrelated in the sport of baseball. We're transitioning from tennis to baseball. The Cincinnati Reds beat the Boston Red Sox yesterday 2-1 at Fenway Park. Now, you're probably thinking, well, why is this really that important, Jonah? Well, here's the thing that's notable about this victory. This was the first time that the Reds have beaten the Boston Red Sox at Fenway Park since Game 7 of the World Series in 1975. It's been about 48 years since the Cincinnati Reds have won a road game at Fenway Park. Obviously, they won Game 7 4-3. That's when Pete Rose was named the World Series MVP. You had Joe Morgan delivering clutch at bats, especially in that Game 7. They were trailing 3-0 in that Game 7, by the way. They won 4-3. Sparky Anderson, of course, the Hall of Famer, was the manager, was the head skipper at the time. So anytime you have some history that dates all the way back to 1975, to me, it's worth noting. That's all the time that I got for you today. Thank you so much for joining me right here on Morning Joe every single Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Make sure to subscribe to my YouTube page, Morning Joe, J-O, with Jonah Malkin on YouTube. Follow me on Twitter at Jonah_Malkin or at morning_Joe_JMalkin97 on Instagram, and Jonah Malkin on TikTok. Thank you so much. And as always, have a lovely rest of your morning.